Words of Joy and Hope. 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year C. Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 10, verses 1 to 12 and 17 to 20. Commentary of Father Fernando Armelini. A Sunday to all. In the last week's Gospel, we have heard the answer that Jesus gave to that person who had come forward saying that he was willing to do anything to follow Jesus. And Jesus told him in a very clear way that he did not have not even a stone to lay his head on, and neither will you have an easy life because you will not have a nest to retire to and live in peace. The one who wants to be my disciple must be totally available to realize my project of a new world and always available to collaborate in its realization. Therefore, my proposal is not for indolent, lazy people. And the text of today's Gospel, we see that to those who are following him, Jesus entrusts immediately a mission to fulfill. Let us listen.
After this, the Lord appointed 72 others, whom he sent ahead of him in pairs, in every town and place he intended to visit.
Who are these 72 who appear suddenly in Luke's Gospel? No one has spoken of them before, and very soon no one will remember them again. The evangelist does not want to give us any information. To understand the message, we must interpret the symbolic message of the numbers in the Bible. The number 72 indicates all the nations of the earth. There was Israel and then 72 pagan nations that constituted the whole humankind. The number 72 is the result of 6 times 12. The number 6 is a symbol of imperfection, and it is still one short of 7. If to these 6 times 12 we add 12 tribes of Israel, we have the number 7, which indicates perfection, totality, infinity. The evangelist wants to tell us that God's design for the world will be realized when all the nations of the earth, first Israel, but then all the other nations, will have heard and accepted the gospel. In fact, in Luke's gospel, the 12 have already been sent out to the 12 tribes of Israel, and now these 12 are sent to all the peoples of the world. The second message is as follows. These 72 do not belong to the group of the apostles, of the 12. They are simple disciples, lay people, we would say today. The mission is to take the gospel to the world and to reach all peoples with this design of salvation is not entrusted to the hierarchy, to the clergy, but all the baptized. Every baptized person should feel responsible for this mission. And third message, what do they have to do? The text says that Jesus sent them ahead. The Greek text says again,
pro prosopou su, cioè
ahead of his face. They are sent to prepare the people to receive this new man's face, the face of Jesus of Nazareth, the beautiful face of the face of the Son of God. Therefore, it is not a question of presenting themselves, but of preparing the people to receive Christ, to receive the gospel. Then the fourth message. He sends them 2 by 2. The proclamation of the gospel is the responsibility of a community. It is not a personal initiative. No. The one who announces the gospel must feel part of a community. And to form a community, there must be at least 2 of them. It is interesting that in the primitive church, the disciples were always going to announce the gospel in pairs. Peter and John go to Samaria, Paul and Barnabas leave for the first journey. Paul and Silvanus leave for the second journey. And this community must feel part of the universal church, sent by the church. Let us now listen to what the inner disposition must be with which these envoys shall fulfill the task that Jesus has entrusted to them.
He said to them, "The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest. Go on your way. Behold, I am sending you like lambs among wolves."
To make each disciple understand the mission entrusted to them, Jesus uses the harvest image. The farmer rejoices in front of the field and sees that the grain is ripe. It is an invitation that Jesus makes to see humanity as God sees it, that is, ready to receive the gospel and accept Christ. It is the invitation to put an end once for all to certain expressions that we hear repeated by many Christians. It is useless to announce the gospel and no one pays attention. People are on something else. If you are a convinced disciple, you will see this humanity as Jesus sees it, mature, ready to receive the gospel because it is programmed for this. The laborers are few, and it is true. There are few of the baptized who are aware that they are to be apostles. What to do to increase the number of these workers? Pray to the master of the harvest. It is not a question of convincing God to do what he must do, for he is more interested than we are in this humanity. Fortunately, prayer does not change God. It changes the one who prays. If I was lazy before, I was not conscious of the task that I was called to perform, then praying, you become attuned to God's thinking and you see this humanity waiting for the announcement you are called to make. The prayer is for the Lord to send forth laborers. The Greek verb used is expale, to cast out. To cast out what? These Christians who settle in their laziness, it is their discouragement that must be cast out. They must be uprooted from their fears and even from the lack of esteem they have for themselves. How many times do we hear Christians say, I am not made to go and evangelize. I try to do what I can. No. Prayer takes you even out of this lack of courage or determination. It frees you from the modesty to present yourself as a believer in a society where the proposal made by Christ is not fashionable. What should these envoys expect? How will they be received? Jesus says, be aware that you are sent into a world of wolves. Sometimes people lament and say, we find ourselves in a society that is regulated by hedonism, by the pursuit of pleasure, which is the only goal for so many people. The society is violent, aggressive, there is no respect. What did you expect? Jesus had already told you that they were sent as sheep among wolves. The wolf is the symbol of violence, of arrogance, the symbol of the logic that rules the old world, that of competition, where the stronger, the more skillful prevails, and the weaker is subjugated and torn into pieces. This is the world where you are sent. If it were already a redeemed world, there would be no need to go and proclaim the gospel to redeem them. But If you do not proclaim the gospel, this world will always remain a world of wolves. And in this world, you enter as a lamb, knowing what fate awaits you, the same that the Master had. The lamb alludes to humility, weakness, and frailty, and no one takes his life. The lamb gives life, is a builder of a world of peace, a world where there is no competition, where there is gratuitous love, even for the enemies, even for those who do you wrong. Therefore, these disciples will have to be attentive because the feelings and behaviors of wolves may re-emerge in them: anger, resentment, the will to prevail, to be seen. And we know that this has happened in the history of the church. Sometimes reasonings appear that tells you that to behave like wolves works. Maybe immediately it does, but you don't build the new world. Pope Gregory the Great has a beautiful reflection on the fact that Jesus sends two by two. Why did he send them two by two? Because they are brothers. They are not friends. Friends we choose, but brothers are those who are given to us. And they may be more or less nice. You can't go into the world by yourself. You must go in pairs, because if you go into the world in pairs, being very different, even arguing, but continuing to love each other, then they give the sign that the angelic community has come into the world, who love each other well, although they have different mentality. And now Jesus clarifies how these envoys should present themselves to the people. Let us listen. Carry no money bag, no sack, no sandals, and greet no one along the way. Into whatever house you enter, first say, "Peace to this household." If a peaceful person lives there, your peace will rest on him. But if not, it will return to you. Stay in the same house and eat and drink what is offered to you, for the laborer deserves his payment. Do not move about from one house to another. In the old world, where the norm accepted by all is competition, the skillful one, the strong one, can accumulate goods, can have possessions. This is not possible in the new world because the norm is sharing. When one has goods and sees the brother in need, even if he is an enemy, he helps him. That is why Jesus says, "He who belongs to the new world and enters this world of wolves cannot present himself with a money bag." What was it for? At that time, there were no pockets. The money was carried in a bag and then tied to the belt. The disciple cannot appear with the money bag because you cannot have the money that you have accumulated. If you have accumulated goods, you have been a wolf, not a lamb. And even if it is for the gospel, if you have a money bag, nobody will believe you because you still belong to the old world, to the world of accumulation. You can't have a sack. The sack is where you put your bread because you must be content with your daily bread. If you have bread in your sack, it means that you have not been attentive to those who were hungry because you should have given it. Sandals. Do not wear sandals. The Greek verb used is important.
Bastadze.
Does not mean to wear sandals. You must put on sandals because those who went barefoot were the prisoners, the mourners, and the slaves. No, you are a normal person. You wear sandals, but not to wear sandals
Basta zero.
Carry a bag. You can't have a spare pair, because if you show up with a spare pair of sandals, it means that you were not attentive to those who didn't have sandals. You should have delivered them. You are in front of a paradoxical language, but the message is clear and highly relevant. Jesus invites us to review certain behaviors of Christians and also certain ecclesiastical structures which must be reduced to what is essential, to what is indispensable. We know well that certain enormous structures that symbolize wealth and power, they constitute a scandal and a counter testimony. The only treasure with which the disciple present himself is that of the gospel message that he announces. It is not an ideology that he must impose, it is a proposal of life, and the church, as we know, loses credibility when it wants to compete with political and economic powers. Then Jesus says that these disciples, these apostles, should not stop to greet anyone. Let us not take it literally. Here, Jesus intends to underline the urgency of the mission. There is no time to waste on useless gossips and trifles. Then, when you enter a house, there are two environments into which the disciples enters to carry the gospel: the house and then the city. When you enter a house, the first thing to say is, I have come to bring you peace. The house indicates the family context, where you must bring peace, the new world, the sharing, and the gospel. But the house also indicates the intimacy of each person, not only the walls. When I let someone into my life, enters my house, and the Gospels asks for hospitality in each person's heart, what should you proclaim that you carry the gospel? Let us be careful, because the universe has reduced the gospel to true moral propositions. Some choices are morally challenging. But the main message is joy, the message of hope. We have heard a lot of people sometimes say, I have no peace. And it is true. Maybe they are in a particular moment of discouragement because they have made even serious mistakes. I have no peace because I have led a life of compromise. I have committed injustice. I have obtained wealth and success by any evil means. I have no peace. The herald of the gospel does not come with reproaches. I have come to bring you joy and peace. However, this peace must be accepted. If there is a child of peace, your peace will descend upon him if he is prepared to accept this deliverance from all that is not love in his heart. And peace will come into his family. Otherwise, it will return to you. It is not a rejection of those who are not yet ready to accept it. It returns to you so that you may propose it again. Stay in the same house and eat and drink what is offered to you. For the laborer, he who proclaims the gospel, is working, and this is very demanding. Paul, who has this work, calls it
Kupos.
a strenuous work, and he is entitled to have the necessities of life. Jesus says for the apostle to accept the invitation given to him. Those who have accepted the gospel may invite you to come to their house and sit at their table. Be content with the frugal food that is set before you. Adapt yourself to the manners and customs of your host without looking assistance at their habits and traditions. This message was very timely in Luke's time because the Jews, for example, and even today have scruples about food. For the Christian, all creatures are blessed by God. They are works of the Creator. There are no impure creatures, and of course, there are no impure people and pure people. All are sons and daughters of God. The Christian who is invited to take the food of someone grateful for the announcement he has received should not pay attention to these distinctions. He accepts what is offered. Then do not move about from one house to another. What does it mean? The temptation is that the apostle can find a lodging more and more comfortable. That is, that he adapts himself at first to what he finds, which may be an impoverished lodging, but then you are offered a better environment and you end up getting to the palaces. Jesus says, stay in the first house, which certainly has more complicated and difficult conditions. You can be welcomed with kindness, but you can also be rejected. Jesus tells how you should behave when the apostles are rejected. They are expelled from a house. Let us listen.
Whatever town you enter, and they welcome you, eat what is set before you, cure the sick in it, and say to them, the kingdom of God is at hand for you. Whatever town you enter, and they do not receive you, go out into the streets and say, the dust of your town that clings to our feet, even that we shake off against you. Yet know this, the kingdom of God is at hand. I tell you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom on that day than for that town.
The disciples sent to proclaim the gospel in the homes, that is, in the private sphere, will proclaim it to individuals and will create new people who think differently, who speak in a new way, who practice their profession in a new way. He will proclaim it to the families. New families will be born where love, harmony, fidelity reigns, where there will be no more disputes over inheritance. But it shall not be proclaimed only in the homes, in the private sphere. It must be proclaimed in the city, in public places. This means that the gospel must transform individuals, but it must transform the whole society. If the society was that of the wolves who were tearing each other apart, building bombs to put themselves in a position of strength concerning others, now the logic of the gospel, which is that of love, must enter society. The wolves must be transformed into lambs. It can also happen that by proclaiming the gospel to the whole society, some will accept it and others will reject it. That is, the old society will want to follow the logic of Cain, the logic of the wolves. What should the disciple who proclaims the gospel in the city and wants to change the world do? The first hypothesis is that the message is received. Jesus says, eat what is offered to you. That is, sit at the table to the banquet. This means to enter into harmony with these societies to which they want to announce the gospel. It means they should not have ideological, cultural, political, and even less religious prejudices. Adapt and respect local customs. Respect the cultures of each people. This means eating what is offered to them. When one sits at the table, it means that there is harmony and respect. Then, to take care of the sick that are there. It is beautiful, the Greek verb.
therapeuin,
It doesn't mean showing up and showing that you know how to do miracles by substituting for doctors. No, nothing like that. Take care of the sick and the weak and do it with joy. The church has done very well in this regard. We all know very well the saints of charity, and even today, where there are situations of hardship, we know that without making noise or being seen, some announce and practice the gospel. But it can also happen that it is rejected, that the old society wants to continue as usual with the logic of the wolves. What should you do? Take off the dust from your feet and tell these people that we have nothing to do with you. Let us be careful to understand well these words of Jesus, because if taken literally, they contradict everything else in the gospel. Think only of the reaction Jesus had with James and John, who wanted to rain fire from heaven on the Samaritans. What does it mean to shake off the dust of your feet? The Jews, when they left the land of Israel and went to pagan lands, when they returned, they did not want to contaminate the Holy Land with the dust of the pagan land. So they shook off all this dust from their feet. Jesus wants to say that when they relate to a society that is still governed by the old logic of competition, and you are rejected, be careful that nothing of the pagan logic with which you have entered into dialogue sticks. It means that dialogue does not mean accepting agreements and renouncing one's own identity as a believer. Sometimes, to be sympathetic, to show that one is up to date, the Christian may be tempted to make the gospel lose its flavor, to make it more acceptable to the recipients. No, the gospel must remain pure. It does not mean that if I reject the dust of pagan logic, that I reject the pagans, that I reject the recipients of the gospel. Jesus says, "Yet know this, the kingdom of God is at hand." Therefore, to shake off the dust from your feet does not mean the people's rejection, but only the logic of the dust, which is that of the old world. Then the final threat. Tell the people it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment than for you. What does this mean? It is the crude language that Semitic preachers often used. It wants to indicate only one thing: the great responsibility of those who reject the gospel. They are ruined as Sidon was devastated when they rejected the angels who had sent them. A society that rejects the gospel will remain a society of wolves and therefore harms itself. This is what is meant by the image of Sidon. Let us now hear what the result of the disciples who were sent on a mission was.
The 72 returned rejoicing and said, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us because of your name." Jesus said, "I have observed Satan fall like lightning from the sky. Behold, I have given you the power to tread upon serpents and scorpions and upon the full force of the enemy, and nothing will harm you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice because the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice because your names are written in heaven."
The disciples who have fulfilled their mission well return to Jesus full of joy. Joy is always the sign of the presence of God. They have fulfilled their mission well, and they are surprised. They say to Jesus, "We have seen that before the proclamation of your gospel, the demons have begun to retreat, to be defeated." And Jesus confirms his impression. "I have observed Satan fall like lightning from the sky." What do these images used by the disciples and Jesus mean? Demons? Satan? They are those who rule the old world, those who create the society of the wolves before the proclamation of the gospel. Who are these demons? They are the idols that ruled the world. They are the ones that led the old society. Who drives the old world? Money, attachment to goods, career success, visibility, dominance over the others. These are the demons that create the old society. When the gospel comes, these demons are doomed to be defeated. We think that these demons will always rule the world. It is not true. The proclamation of the gospel and these faithful disciples have experienced it. The proclamation of the gospel is stronger. Many times the Christians do not have the certainty, we do not have this faith that the word of the Master changes hearts and changes society. It is an unstoppable victory. Now, a biblical image is used. "I have given you the power to tread upon serpents and scorpions and upon the full force of the enemy, and nothing will harm you." Let us note that it does not say that he has eliminated the encounter with dangerous animals from the disciples' path. No, these demons are always dangerous, and we must continue to confront them, says Jesus. "You may walk among these dangerous beasts, but you will not fall prey to them." Jesus does not promise an easy life, but a victorious life if we have faith in the power of the gospel we proclaim. Who are these serpents and scorpions? Let us remember Psalm 91 that we all know. "For he commands his angels with regard to you to guard you wherever you go. With their hands they shall support you, lest you strike your foot against a stone." You can tread upon the asp and the viper, trample the lion and the dragon. These are the images to say that the disciple should not fear. At his side is the Lord and the power of the gospel. These envoys will encounter opposition. The dangerous animals will be there, but the disciple will trample them, not the people, but the logic of the old world. These are the enemies: attachment to possessions, to money, to career. These are the enemies of the gospel. So, these words of Jesus sound like a condemnation of all pessimism. They are a denial of all those who only grieve and repeat disconsolately, "The world will go from bad to worse." It is not true. Who says these things means they do not believe in the power of the gospel. Jesus promised that he who proclaims the gospel will witness these radical changes in the old world. He will see the new world being born. I wish you all a good Sunday and a good week.